Okay, welcome to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob Dove, and as always, I would like to ask you to support us in whatever way you can. You can like us. You can, if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe. You can follow us, or maybe even help us out through Patreon. But any way you can support us, it would be appreciated. Today's guest, and this is a mouthful, so I always have to take my time with this, is Grand Inca of the Okwe-Honwe Nation. She's the Grand Council Member, Chief of Medicine of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aborigine American People.
Absolutely.
So I hope you wrote that all down, audience, because I'm not going to say it again. I think I'm going to go with Chief Pomaj. Can I do that?
Yes, absolutely. I prefer it.
All right. Okay. Things that she's known for. One is that she's the creator of Pittsburgh's first and only Aborigine indigenous apothecary and healing space, Cultural Oasis. And she's been doing that for over 16 years. And you're going to hear more about that later. She's the creator and founder of the IPAA Food, Forestry, Arts, and Culture in the Lincoln, Leamington, Chadwick Park area. She's a member of the Lincoln Leamington Green and Beautification Team, a member of the Lincoln Leamington Community Consensus Group, and co-founder of the Lincoln Leamington Collaborative. She's on the Nagley Run Watershed Task Force Committee. She's on the Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund Committee and Subcommittee. She's a founding member of the Trolley Three Rivers Allegheny Land Initiative, protecting green spaces in Pittsburgh communities. A member of the Environmental Justice Table, and I'm going to stop there.
Thank you.
There's just so much more to say about this wonderful woman.
Gratitude.
So, as you know, Chief Pomaj, the way that we do this is that I ask you to relate your spiritual journey from childhood till present.
Okay.
I'll ask you some questions, and then you can leave the audience with some words of wisdom. So we'll start with your journey from childhood till now.
My journey from childhood starts with my grandmother connecting me with the land, introducing me to the importance of honoring the land, respecting it, and being one with nature. And as I continued to grow, I carried those principles with me. She gave me a foundation to stand on. She was a midwife. Her mother was a midwife. Her mother's mother was a midwife. And so being connected to birth and life and the circle of life, which includes death as well, and understanding from her perspective that, we're energy and we never die. And I didn't understand as a child, as an offspring, when she would say those things to me. And she took me out and we would forage. And she showed me what foraging was.
Was this here in the Pittsburgh area?
This is in the Pittsburgh area.
Okay.
Now, she originally is from Texas and Louisiana by way of Florida.
Okay.
her grandmother by way of Florida to Cato, Texas, and then into Louisiana, Shreveport, by the way, and parts of New Orleans too as well. And so she brought that culture with living on the land, growing her own food, making her own medicines, tinctures, and things like. She brought that up north when she traveled up here well before I came out of the womb, her and my grandfather. And so as a young one, she would show me what the culture was that she grew up in. And so she would take me out and show me where wild greens would grow. This is in the Homewood area, by the way. And so she would show me that wild greens grow there, and then in Larmer areas where they would grow, and in Leamington area, and mainly the eastern side of the city, East Liberty.
Yeah.
And this is before all this new development. Of course, I'm taking you back 30, 40 years, right? Roughly almost 50 years, I would say. I'm taking you back. And so with that, I developed a respect for land, and a respect for nature, and a respect for species and people, and understood that the way she would tell me, we're the people, meaning we're the principal people and we're the responsible ones. We must be maintaining the land in a way so everyone benefits and everyone thrives. And that was the foundation she gave me. So as I got older, realizing that a lot of my peers didn't grow their own food because we also had a large community farm. It was our family lineage farm, although it was for the community. We shared, and so people could come and get food and stuff. And she taught me principles of understanding our connection to the soil. So we garden, and when we grew our food and when we harvest, we didn't wear shoes in the garden. So we didn't wear shoes or socks. She would let the little ones wear socks because they icky until they get used to the soil and understand that, we're made up of these very minerals in this soil. Like, they're in us. They just compose differently. We have skin. This is dirt or soil.
Yeah.
And so that was a great foundation. But as I got older and realized that my peers didn't have that same experience, a lot of my peers, not all, but some did, but a lot didn't, I started to shy away from talking about that part of my upbringing and more just wanted to be like everybody else. Well, no, we go to grocery stores and we get this and we get that, and we get the frozen this and we get the packaged that already, and we get the canned that already. And so, yeah, I kind of shied away from telling people, who I am, and just wanted to kind of fit in. And I did that up until upwards of my teen years, late teens, like 18, 17. And I started to want to go back to understanding what my grandmother's, the secrets, the stories, the things she told me, the words of wisdom that I didn't quite understand. I started to live certain things and experience certain things and see how other people lived, and the traumas in the communities, and all those things I started to see and pay attention to. As a child, you don't pay attention to that.
Right.
But those things existed. We know the civil rights movement and all these different things happen because of oppression and colonialism and colonization. So I started to really feel what that felt like. I was protected as a baby, as an offspring, didn't have to experience anything. And now I'm being out more, and I'm moving away from being underneath my mom's wing and my dad's wing and my grandpa and my grandma's wing, and I'm experiencing life on life's terms. And it was a awakening for me that there are a lot of people who are hurt, and a lot of people who don't have a connection with, earth and the land and the water and the air and the animal species. And so as I continued in my studies in life, I decided I wanted to help people. I wanted to use the gifts that my grandma gave me and help people with those gifts, right? And so I chose to go to Chatham University intentionally for their master's in counseling psychology, because I wanted to bring some of our traditions and how we heal ourselves mentally, emotionally, and physically to that discipline. And I was told, well, you might not be able to do that because if it's not in line with certain standards of practice, APA guidelines and things like that, you may have a difficult time. So one of my professors said to me, I suggest that if you want to do what you want to do, that you stay focused on your culture and create something, and then add it to what you already do as a psychologist, as a therapist. And I appreciated her for that. At first, I was like offended. Like, what do you mean? Like, I can, she was like, you're not going to be able to do that so easily, right? Yeah. And you won't be able to take insurance. She started telling me all these, you can't, you won't. And so I said, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to find a way, because this is important. What I learned and the values and the principles that I have, natural ways of healing and things like that, I can bring that to the people. So I created Cultural Oasis, which 16 years ago. Of course, I wasn't a teenager, so I had to go to school and, do the application and all of those things you have to do, right? Yeah. And I decided to do this, and I started off really small. in the space I'm in and didn't have much of anything in there. And my whole focus initially was teaching people how to use natural products, just homemade soaps and lotions and dishwashing liquid and laundry detergent, because my grandmother made those things from scratch and I watched her make those things. And it started off with that and it exploded. People started asking me questions about my culture. So I am an Aboriginal American Indian, and Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and excluding Indians not taxed. We have a special relationship with Congress, and we have a special relationship with the land. And our culture has not been talked about so much, although you see it in different nuances of culture here in the Americas. It's just not given proper context that, a lot of that is by people that look like me. And so I thought that it was a perfect time to introduce myself to the community after hiding myself through my teen years and my youth years because I felt like, I didn't fit and I wanted friends and I wanted to get along with everybody. And so I would just make myself invisible as far as my culture because I wanted to fit in. And then this was a time for me to say, no, this is my spiritual journey. My grandmother instilled these wonderful spiritual gifts inside of me. And I have a right to share this with the people. And so as people started to inquire, I started going back to my traditional garb and wearing our traditional hairdresses and things like that. And people hadn't seen that in a while from me. Like my childhood, we had the little head feathers and all of that. But as a teenager, I put that stuff away because I wanted to fit in and not be ostracized. So now I'm an adult and I'm like, my culture is important and our story is important and our healing modalities and the things that we did to help people to be good and be better. I'm going to do that. And I started doing that.
Yeah. So growing up, were there certain rituals that you participated in? And even though you said you put your garb and your headdress away, did you pull them out certain times of the year and put those on?
Absolutely. So what we do, and especially on my dad's side, my dad, his people held to be Anahuia or Cherokee. That's what they held to be. And so he really, yes.
Pardon me, is that Cherokee as opposed to Iroquois?
So
are those different nations?
Anahuia is the proper term. Cherokee was a later term that was kind of when people came and said, we can't understand what you're saying. Oh, so are you saying this? Well, we'll just call you this instead, right? That's kind of how that happened. But Anahuia is the term that, in the ancestral language, we would have been referring to ourselves. And this just means that, a lot of us had ascribed to identifying ourselves as a group or a community. And so we would call ourselves certain things as a group and as a community, although we always understood that we're one people. And so many nations on the land, but although we're still one people. So certain confederacies were created by the people on the land. And the Iroquois Confederacy of Nations was one that was created during a time of turmoil and bringing all of the tribes together under one umbrella to say, hey, we're one people, and reminding us of that. And that's what the Iroquois Confederacy of Nations did. They were the ones instrumental in the development of the United States Constitution. They worked hand in hand with the founding fathers, as they say, to create this document that was going to be the governing document for the people that were coming on the land. And it was very similar, or the pattern, or the idea, I should say, the democratic principles, as Congress likes to say, they found them in the Iroquois Confederacy of Nations principles of their great law of peace, which is our Constitution. So we don't really, from what my grandmothers told us and my grandfathers told us, we didn't really call ourselves these names. We accepted them over time. So Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, it goes on and on and on. We accepted them over time, but we considered ourselves the principal people, or the Onkwe Onwe is a term that we refer to ourselves, and it just means original people. We're originally here, we're the Onkwe Onwe. And as people came with the different language, Portuguese, Dutch, Spanish, and all, they began to place these labels on us, and so here we are today.
Okay.
But we're one people. many
So I
nations.
interrupted you. We were just starting to talk about uh, different ceremonies
All
and
right.
things that you might go to as you were growing up.
So always doing the powwow, and the way we do powwow is very. Most people can gather their minds around it. It's not about for us initially, and I know there's other types of powwows that happen now on the land with other groups. For us, it's like a reunion. It's like the people come from all over the land to this one particular gathering. We call a powwow. They call it a family reunion now. So we kind of
Uh,
don't even use that word as much. We're getting back to using it. We do use it, and there's powwows that happen all over where there's specific powwows to join together at the mounds to do ceremony. So there's powwows in New Orleans that happens every Green Corn Festival is one of them, or the Harvest Festival, right? And so those ones in particular are, or the Thanksgiving Festival. So it's not the Thanksgiving that you would think of with like turkey and all that stuff that I still love to eat. Like I love sweet potatoes and yams and the salads and the macaroni and all of that and the cornbread and all that. It's not that for us. The Harvest Festival is being thankful for the plentiful, bountiful harvest of fruits and vegetables that we've yielded
right.
from our planting. So what we have sown, and now we will reap those benefits, and that's the harvest. And we celebrate that around the fall time because it's the end of season. So now we're reaping everything we've grown throughout the summer, the spring and the summer, and it's that final harvest, right? And a lot of canning happens,
Uh-huh.
canning and drying out of things, and so that we have food for the winter to carry us to the next season. So those were the kind of ceremonies and holidays, just using that term loosely. But those are the gathering days and the celebrations that we had. We also had celebrations of birth, and where we would come together when someone is
Hmm.
giving birth, and this is the new, and we have a naming ceremony, or what we like to say a titling ceremony, and that is a celebration, and that happens whenever that happens because
Yeah.
babies are always coming.
So where do a lot of these ceremonies take place?
So for us here in this area, we've done most of our ceremonies in the Highland Park area. We used to do them at the Point because that's a sacred
Yeah.
area there, and then it became like city. A lot of festivals, a lot of different things that would kind of happen at the same time that our
Right.
natural festivals and ceremonies would happen. So we started doing them at the Highland Park area because it's easier to get the groves and that kind of thing
Right.
than it is at the Point now. So we're working with the city. Hopefully there'll be an honoring of our specific ceremonies and specific um, days of festival that we'll be able to work with the city to be able to have them on those days
Yeah.
too as well. But before a lot of the new people coming onto the land, my grandmother told me other stories that most of them will be down there at the Point.
Yeah. So I heard somewhere that there are also activities that go on in Ohio around the mounds.
Serpent Mound, yes. So every matter of fact, it should be coming up in September. There's a gathering, and we do this gathering once a year where the clan mothers, that's a term that we use in our culture too, for the heads of the states or the heads of nations, right? We
Hmm.
use that term. We use Grandinka too as well, and we use chief. The clan mother is kind of an older term of endearment and respect and honor. So the clan mothers would come from the various tribes, the various nations. And I would like to say nation states because that's what we call what we are ourselves as nation states. And the mothers of lineages are the heads of the states, right? So, because we give birth to the men and the women.
Yeah.
So, in our culture, we're a matriarchal society, a matriarchal culture. So, the women are the chiefs or the clan mothers or the grandinkas, right? And the men that we crown, or not to say crown, but we there's a voting process. Of course, someone is suggested to be the co-chief, and there is a ceremony, and everyone decides, and we vote, and then he's the co-chief. So he's a support for the clan mother or the grandinka or the chief of the nation. The support,
So that's how the man gets his title.
yes.
But in
The
terms of
women we give it
you're
to.
getting your title as Grand Inca and Chief,
That comes
is
from
that inherited
it
or
comes from our mothers. It
Okay.
comes from our mothers. And now, unless the nation is defunct for whatever reason, and this happened during war time too, if
Uh,
people got separated, there is a process under the Great Law of Peace to recrown or rehead nations again. And it's a process, and they would come into the fold of the Confederacy, of course. And then there's a process, and there's a ceremony, and they have to exhibit the proper seven span thick. And when
yeah.
we say seven span, that is the to temper with justice, to have peace at the center of yourself, to be able to listen, to be fair and just. So all these things have to be exhibited, and then one can be re-given the title again of, of the Grand Inca or the chief or the clan mother, if they want to revive their nation again, and that can happen. And so there's different spelled out steps within the Great Law of Peace that we have to abide by in order for that to happen. If a lineage has fallen off, and they are
Hmm.
reviving it back again because they may have lost members, and now
Yeah.
there's not enough to be a nation, right? Again, and so if they want to reestablish that, that's a process they would have to go
Yeah.
through council, and yeah.
So some of some of what I've heard and read about, and actually seen on a couple television programs, including one called Longmire, that deals with, uh, I guess, First Nation
Hmm.
situations, is that when the government, the U.S. government, decided, okay, we owe reparations, or we need to give money to the tribes because of the land that we took from them. Uh, and at that point, a lot of people wanted to say that they were members of
Hmm.
particular nations and
Hmm.
tribes so that
Hmm.
they could get a piece of that
Hmm.
money.
I've seen those nefarious things happen
Yeah.
over the time of.
And the tribes, in response to that, then started to make it more difficult to identify yourself
Hmm.
as a member.
Hmm.
And they looked at blood, and they looked at DNA, and
Mm.
they did those sorts of things. Uh, and I know that within Pennsylvania there are no reservations, there are no
Right.
tribal lands.
There's no reservations. Absolutely.
So has your nation and uh, your people gotten involved in any of that, um, any of those disputes and issues, and how has that played out?
So how we are engaging with invoking our rights here in this area, we call it the Delaware Territory because that's the treaty that our ancestors established with um, the English or the
Hmm.
Europeans, as it were. And it's still in force because treaties are one or the highest form of law on the land, or supreme law of land, right along with the Constitution. And so we first have to be clear on who we are as a people because there's a lot of confusion around who are the Indians
Right.
and what does that mean to be an Indian. And we never called ourselves Indian, although we accepted the term again. Like I said, we accepted Cherokee,
Yeah.
Choctaw, so forth and so on. Indian was a term that we came to, that our ancestors came to an agreement with for identification purposes in law. And so we are a specific group of people. And if we were to Google the Bouvier's dictionary, which is adapted to the Constitution, it was written by John Bouvier back in the 1700s or late 1700s, early 1800s. Um, this dictionary is profound because it's adapted to the language of the Constitution. And Indians in the Constitution, where the phrase or the clause is Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, where it states the direct taxes should be apportioned among the several states, and it goes in to explain, all free persons, and then it says all persons bound to service for a term of years, and then it says and excluding Indians not taxed, and then three-fifths all other persons with a capital P persons at the end of the sentence, which means corporations. And so that Indians not taxed is a specific phrase that refers to the Aborigines of the land, or so-called Indians, right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't call ourselves that. We accepted it, though, over time. And it also goes into explain the Indian tribes. So there's different meanings of Indian tribes. For us, the definition of Indian tribes refers to the Aboriginal race of men. Why they say men? Because we're matriarchs too, but okay. The Aboriginal race of men found in the United States, right, by
Yeah.
the Europeans. So we are the Aboriginals, we are the Aborigine people. And so we are not Native Americans who have a different relationship with Congress and a different history and a different story here on the land. And to be honorable and respectful of the differences is to understand who we are as peoples. So Native Americans have a relationship classified as Title 25. And there's a whole host of what their benefits are and the privileges that they have underneath the United States jurisdiction as wards to the United States, and they're overseeing, their lands and assisting them in the contracts that they have with them. And then there's our people, and we're a separate, distinct group of Aboriginal races of people that are here referring to as the Aborigines. So we're outside of that umbrella of people or jurisdiction of people, and we're over here where Congress has established a government-to-government relationship with our people very uniquely. And so we are, when it comes to our rights, because our people have a different history of colonization, the colonization of our people were reclassification. So we were reclassified from Indian in 1929 through the Racial Integrity Act by Walter Ashby Plecker, who was the first registrar for the Vital Statistics Office that became later the Bureau of Vital Statistics, right, for birth certificates and death records. Well, he was the first registrar, and he was a staunch eugenics, unfortunately for him, and very, very, very racist. And so he created a Racial Integrity Act for racial purity, wanting to separate my people from your people, and saying that my people as Indians would be referred to as colored. And anyone who was not white, who did not view in his eyes as a white person from Europe with no other admixture to them, that they would be classified as white. So there were only two classifications that people could choose for birth records, census records, and things like that, even though my people were not to be enumerated. So as Indians not taxed, we're not to be on the census rolls. You won't find us in enumerated records and things of that nature because of the agreement we have with Congress, that we're excluded out of that. Though and I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm going to get you to a place of full understanding and overstanding. In the 1850 census, there was a clause in the census. It's instructions to the marshals. So it was the marshals that went out to do the census in the 1800s. So in 1860, it stated Indians not taxed or not to be enumerated on this roll or any other schedule. We were not to be enumerated. But then in 1870 census, 10 years later, that very thing changed, and it added something. It said Indians not taxed or not to be enumerated on this schedule or any other roll, except for those who'd renounced their tribal rule to exercise the rights of citizens, now next to IND in the column of color. So now they were reclassifying the Indians who chose to renounce tribal rule to exercise the rights of citizenship. To do that thing, they could no longer classify themselves as Indians. So now that's when the color thing started, and then and that was in the 1800s. So now they're on those census records under the label that says color, right? And then in 1929, like I said, he doubled down on it and said at the state level, we're going to create this Racial Integrity Act, and now they can't be classified as Indian at all, not even in the column where it says colored, can they write IND? We're just going to say they're colored people in total. And so that's what happened. And around that same period of time, probably a few years later, the Chickahominy tribe that was in Virginia, again, remember, we didn't call ourselves these names, but we accepted them. So the Chickahominy people, or tribe, I should say, wanted state and federal recognition. So they fought for recognition. And what happened is They called in Walter Ashby Pleckert as an expert witness for the state because he created this Racial Integrity Act thing,
Yeah.
reclassifying my people from Indian to color. And so when he came in to as an expert witness, he said he didn't see any reason why the Chickahominy people should be classified as Indian in this, and that they should not receive this recognition because all non-reservation Indians should be reclassified as Negro. So Thomasina v. Jordan, and this lawsuit was won in 2009. She challenged that for her ancestors because that's what happened directly to her people, her bloodline, her lineage. And so they were reclassified as Negroes, right? And a lot of our people were reclassified because my ancestry was at one point in time reclassified as Negro too. We've corrected all of these ills with the state. My lineage my nation has done that. But a lot of people still are fighting to have these corrections made. So with that being said, the act was, the state Supreme Court ruled that it was wrong and that it was discriminatory and it was genocide and all of those terms. And they have grandfathered back the Chickahominy people into the recognition now. So now they have, I think it's federal and state recognition for that particular state that they were in. And I can't remember what state they were. It's in the document. I'll send it to you. It's interesting. Okay. But yeah, so there's a lot of evidence that has pointed to how my people were reclassified in these documents so that we could be erased. And it was a paper genocide. So we're still here, but it's a paper genocide. So we're not the Native Americans because they fought to make sure that their identity was solid within the government structure as Title 25. And we, who never wanted to renounce our tribal rule, we never wanted to leave our tribal rule. We wanted to stay within our culture, but were forced to assimilate it, right, through paper. Only paper, though, because we still didn't give up who we are. And here we are today. So we are now enlightening people and educating people that we're still here.
So when you say non-tax, that means that you're in a category where you pay no federal taxes?
Yes, and it's a little bit more than that. And I know people think of money when they think of the term, but we got to take us back to the 1700s when the Constitution was written. What, 1776? Don't quote me because my years.
Okay. Yeah,
but it was 1700s.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So during that time, you have to look at what did a tax mean. Well, all these taxes today didn't exist back then. There wasn't all these taxes. If you look at a lot of these taxes happened in the 1900s. The 1920s, 30s, 40s is when the bulk of all of this thing happened. It just became a monster and it just grew and grew and grew. Prior to that, tax meant a lot of things. It meant to enlist people on a roll, to censor people, to burden, to put a strain on, there's just you got to do Bouvier's dictionary or etymology of the word tax, and it's just all of these things that the government, the state was saying we're going to have a right to do to our citizens because we are creating this environment for them to work and thrive and do these things. So we, I guess, and I can't speak for your founding fathers, but I will say that they wanted to make sure that whatever structure they set in place, there had checks and balances to it, and it just grew and grew and grew. For us, we are outside of those things. So yes, to be Indian not tax means to not be put a burden on, to not enlist us on rolls, to not enumerate us, to not censure us, quieting our voices, to not do all of these things, to not charge us and these things. And so this is what our genocide looks like, because that's those very things that we're not supposed to be subject to, we're subject to. And that's why this legislation is so important, just to remember what did the founding fathers and what did they agree upon with my ancestors, what did your ancestors agree, what did they come to the table and say they're going to do, knowing that they're on indigenous land and wanting to stay here and wanting to grow here. So there were provisions put in place for our protections that every treaty just sign the treaty at the table and turn around and say, yep, we're not going to honor that. So now we're saying, let's come back to the tables again. Let's talk peace again, and let's do what our noble ancestors did, because both of us have noble ancestors, and both of us most likely have some nefarious ones too. Yeah. Because we always say, is anyone responsible for the sins of their ancestors? And we say no. I'm not responsible for what ills my ancestors may have done. I'm responsible for what I do with the knowledge that I have. And you're not responsible for whatever ills your ancestors may have done. You're responsible for what you do today. And that's where we are with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not holding grudges. We're saying, hey, let's look at history and learn from it.
Yeah.
And be good together, because we're all on this land. And the land gives us the food, it gives us the housing, it gives us the medicine, it gives us everything we need. So if we're destroying that for ill-gotten gain, big pharma, big corporations, big whoever, at the expense of the people, I don't think there should be profits over people.
Yeah.
I just think there should be people who control those things in a way that everybody eats and everybody has roof over their head and everybody is healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a surreal, perfect world. I don't know. We're working towards getting back to that, because it did exist at one time. So. Yes.
Yeah, and that's I guess that's a great point, that it did exist at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not this impossible dream. It's something that was reality.
Mm-hmm.
We turned away from it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't go back.
And I see indigenous peoples all over the planet, and I see non-indigenous people all over the planet working for that very goal.
Yeah.
To heal the land, to heal the waters, to heal the air, to make sure that we all have, because at one time there was abundance, and there still is abundance. I don't buy into the narrative, there's not enough food, there's not enough house space for people to live. There's more than enough. It's just, do people want that to happen?
Yeah.
And I say the majority of us do. I talk to a lot of people from different ethnic groups and different walks of life, and it's a common theme. We just want good food. We want non-GMO food. We want real food.
Yeah.
And we don't want a lot of chemicals and a lot of those harmful things. Rachel Carson wrote a wonderful book, and I have a lot of respect for Rachel Carson, because she, Silent Spring, she brought that information to the forefront. And this is so many years ago, and we're still talking about this today.
Right.
It says a lot. It says a lot.
It does. Well, it's because of Rachel Carson that I met you,
Yep.
Patty DeMarco,
love her.
who I've had on this show, was doing a book signing on her book, In the Footsteps of Rachel Carson.
Footsteps of
I don't
Rachel
mind
Carson.
giving her a plug.
Yes, absolutely. I got a signed copy.
And you were there at that book signing, as was I.
Yes.
And I overheard, I was eavesdropping on a conversation you were having with somebody else, and I thought, wow, this person is so interesting. I've just got to have her on my show.
Gratitude.
So it's taken us a while to get to this point.
Yes.
But I'm so glad you're here today.
I'm appreciative. So, she wrote another book for the project that she connected me with, the Reimagine Appalachia project that's happening. Great movement over there.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
impoverished community of devastation after the mills closed and the mines closed, and that whole town was built on that.
Yeah.
And what they're doing now to help reinvigorate that area. And so she wrote a book, and it is in dedication of her work with the Reimagine Appalachia. And I wrote the land acknowledgement in that book for her. So if you get that book, you'll know that Chief Pomaj did the land acknowledgement for her. I'm honored that she asked that I do that for that book.
Okay, you heard it here. Reimagine Appalachia by Patty DeMarco.
Yeah.
Okay, getting back
Yes.
to Chief Pomaj and your story. I'm curious about the apothecary shop, and because it's the only one of its kind in Pennsylvania,
It is.
about the process that you had to go through to get a license or to get approved to do this. How did that work out?
So this is culturally, I'm just living my culture. And so none of those things really were important or really applied to this because it was just education on how did my people heal ourselves? What did we do as medicine? How did we make our medicines? What went into the process of, growing our plants or either foraging for them naturally in the environment? And a lot of it was just really a foundation that my grandma gave me. And of course, a lot of it was studying with the other roots doctors and the bush doctors that I had met over the years from the islands. A lot of my, I would say, foundational work comes from a lot of the medicine. Well, we call ourselves root doctors and bush doctors. So don't be weirded out by the term. Please don't think it's got anything to do with anything nefarious or crazy. It's just understanding that roots are medicine as well, and bush, what people call weeds. We don't call them weeds, we call them bush. And there's bush medicine. And so I studied with a lot of other indigenous healers. And I circled myself in I placed myself in those circles to study and have created various modalities from my years of research. So this went into years and years of researching indigenous medicines of the Americas and the indigenous medicine people of the Americas.
So when you say the islands, what are you?
So Jamaica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Haiti too. People say Haiti, we say Haiti as well. And having a lot of connections with the people there, the medicine people there, the bush and roots doctors there. And a lot of my education, or I would say enlightenment, comes from my connections with those doctors and sharing of information. So for the last 10 years prior to now, a lot of that was where that foundation came from, and conferences, and a lot of conferences that I've found myself at around the Americas here, not the Americas, South America, Central America. I haven't been able, but via Zoom and that, I've been able to connect with some of the medicine women and men in Central America and South America, Peru, and Bolivia, and places like that. Those are all Zoom, though. Physically, I've not been able to get there.
Yeah.
But a lot of that has happened in local conferences here on this part of the land. So North America is where I was able to actually travel and do a lot of this work.
So you haven't written a book yet and put all this together.
I have written a book, but it's not about that. It is regarding climate resiliency and Aborigine culture. And it's not published. What happened was a few years ago, I was invited to apply or suggested that I apply to a book that was going to be written. It was going to be an international book on climate change and or climate crises, and how communities and populations were dealing with it. And so I applied for it, and I got accepted, and I was asked to write a chapter. So we all wrote. I think there's going to be there was 40 chapters to be included in the book, and and it was a partnership between St. John Hopkins University, St. John Hopkins Medical Center, and a HBCU. I can't remember the name of the HBCU. It just slips my mind now, and that's so rude. I can't remember which It was a HBCU. I'll send the information to you so you could tell the people later.
Okay.
And so it was a partnership between them, and so they did a call out all over the country for people, and actually as far as certain countries, a few countries in Africa were participating. Australia was participating, and India was participating. And so I wrote a section, Onkwe Onwe, and climate resiliency throughout the ages, and talking about our connections to the land and how we dealt with climate change, what we did to make sure that we could still grow food during climate changes. And it's just a whole breakdown of what those various things look like over the times, from South America all the way over here to North America. And it's just so unfortunate because as the project continued on, funding always happens. Well, we have to cut back. So there was a lot of cutting back, and they had to cut back several people's chapters. My chapter wasn't the only one, but mine was one that didn't make the cut. And I was really disappointed about that. So I still have it. I did all that work. It took me a year to write that. that chapter. So I'm just going to further it and continue it and just make it a book eventually. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay. Well, that went somewhere where I wasn't quite prepared to go. That
Oh,
was interesting.
okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I'm looking at our time, and we're
Mm,
getting close to the end of our talk.
okay.
So, what I'd like to do is have you offer the audience a few words of wisdom, just words that you would like to leave them with, uh, so that they can ponder that and decide if it resonates with them, and
Absolutely.
they wanna hold on to that.
All right. Well, I'll say that in Lakek Alakain, which means the light in me honors the light in you. For we are the light. And I encourage us to be the light that we want to see, to shine throughout the world, so that we are doing the great noble work of our most noble ancestors. And as we reach into the recesses of our own minds, our own hearts, and our own spirits, we will feel that oneness, that connection with the land that we are standing on. We will feel that connection with this earth, for we only have this one. It is our responsibility to meld ourselves within the soils and the richness of the land that gives us sustenance and gives us life. We are one with these elements, the wind, the fire, the water. We are one with the soil. We are one with the species that we take for granted sometimes because we expect them to always be there. When we're not mindful of what we do as beings on this land, we affect all of our connections with everything. So it is important for us to look within our own selves and say, what is it that I can do better? What is it that I can offer to change what I don't like, to change what is happening that doesn't serve all of humanity? So, in Lakek Alakain, the light in me honors the light in you.
And with that, audience, keep in mind that we are all one. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.